6 years earlier, this same enemy had been shattered in 6 days. So when war came again, one side was sure it could never be caught off guard. It was wrong. On the holiest day of the year, two armies attacked at once, and for a few terrifying days, the impossible seemed to be happening. This is the Yom Kippur War, the surprise that nearly broke a nation and the lesson it burned into military history. After its stunning victory in 1967, Israel felt secure behind the lands it had captured. Along the Suez Canal and on the Golan Heights, it built strong defensive lines and watched its neighbors with confidence. Its intelligence services believed the Arab states were in no position to launch a serious attack. That belief hardened into certainty. But across the border, Egypt and Syria had spent years quietly preparing, rebuilding, rearming, and planning a very different kind of war. They knew they could not win by refighting 1967, so they planned around Israel's greatest strengths and its assumptions. On October 6, 1973, Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, when much of the country was at rest, the attack came. In the south, the Egyptian army launched a massive, carefully rehearsed crossing of the Suez Canal. Using water cannons, they blasted through the great sand barriers on the far bank and poured thousands of troops across in hours. Crucially, they came prepared for Israel's air power and armor. Dense networks of anti-aircraft and anti-tank missiles blunted the very weapons that had won the last war. In the north, Syrian forces stormed the Golan Heights with hundreds of tanks, threatening to break through toward Israel itself. For the first days, Israel reeled. Its lines bent, its losses mounted, and for a frightening moment, its commanders faced the possibility of real defeat. But the early shock did not last. Israel mobilized with desperate speed, calling up its reserves and rushing them to the fronts. On the Golan, exhausted defenders held against overwhelming odds, then slowly pushed the Syrians back. In the south, after brutal tank battles, Israeli forces found a gap between the Egyptian armies and drove straight through it. In one of the boldest moves of the war, they crossed the canal themselves, this time going the other way, and struck deep behind the Egyptian army. Within weeks, the battlefield had swung dramatically. The armies that had achieved total surprise now found themselves in serious danger. Under intense international pressure, and with the two superpowers watching nervously, a ceasefire finally brought the fighting to a halt. Militarily, Israel ended the war ahead, but it did not feel like a victory. The shock of the surprise and the heavy losses shook the nation to its core and led to hard questions about how it had been caught unprepared. For its opponents, crossing the canal and shattering the myth of invincibility was itself a profound achievement, one that reshaped the region's politics. Remarkably, the war eventually opened a path no one expected. Within a few years, bitter enemies would sign a historic peace. But the deepest lesson was about the mind. The greatest danger the Yom Kippur War showed is the belief that your enemy has learned nothing and that you can never be surprised. Overconfidence, not weakness, had nearly been the fatal flaw. Surprise has decided many wars, but few surprises in history were as complete or as devastating as the one a small, frozen nation once inflicted on a giant that had invaded it. That's the next story.